welcome into a special solo edition of the Pain and Panic podcast. I'm Adam Sheets with you. Chris taking a well-deserved vacation down to Florida this week, so he's in a lot better weather than I am up here in Pennsylvania, but I'm hoping he's having a great vacation. But as Chris is away, I get the opportunity to talk about some things I like to talk about, which is Penn State football. Chris, more of a pro guy, I understand. Grew up in New York. He's a pro guy, but, getting a chance to talk about college sports, something I am very passionate about, really appreciate. We're going to be talking about the Penn State coaching search, as Penn State looking for their next head football coach after they let go of James Franklin. We are still going to do our upset picks and game picks. Chris did send me them, so I'll be able to read those guys off to you guys as you guys listen here. But we're going to start with the Penn State coaching search. Then we will get into weekly picks, upset picks, as we always do every time on our Friday morning episode. So again, if you're just joining us, please subscribe. We really appreciate it. Helps us keep the channel going. Please make sure to go check out our shorts. Make sure to check all that stuff out. We do a great job. We really appreciate all the support. We love the comments, even when they're negative. We do appreciate all the interaction with you guys. Everybody is entitled to their opinion, so we like to hear your guys' opinions as well. Sometimes helps us out. We're not the smartest people all the time, so we do sometimes appreciate hearing what you guys have to say. But again, as I said, we're going to start with the Penn State coaching search. As everyone kind of knows, we kind of talked about it on the show a couple times. Penn State fired James Franklin back on Sunday, October 12th. So I'm recording this here on Thursday, November 13th. So we're about over a month actually, away since Penn State has made this decision. James Franklin, 12 years at the helm with the Nittany Lions, 104 wins, 45 losses in his career at Penn State. Tied for the second most wins in school history with Rip Engel, only behind, of course, Joe Paterno with his 409 wins. Penn State has a lot of success under James Franklin. I want to kind of try to preface that as Penn State's trying to move on here with this coaching search. James Franklin, multiple bowl wins, in the New Year's Six, won the Fiesta Bowl in 2017. In 2019, they won the Cotton Bowl. In 2022, they won the Rose Bowl. Last year, they won the Fiesta Bowl. They ended up losing in the Orange Bowl in the college football playoff semifinal. They hosted a college football playoff game against SMU. But Penn State, after a 3-3 start, an emotional and tough loss to Oregon this year, really derailed the season. A tough loss then to UCLA, 42-37. Lose to Northwestern at home by 1 point. And it was a very ugly scene at Beaver Stadium, and Pat Kraft decided to pull the plug and make a coaching change. I think a lot of people kind of saw that coming with the way, it was going down the tracks. I think a lot of people understand that, and I think a lot of people understood where Pat Kraft was coming from. Of course, you've seen a lot of backlash from it, not just by some Penn State fans, but a lot of the national media who were very critical of James Franklin while he was the head coach at Penn State. I'm not going to, discredit the hypocrisy that, I think a lot of national media was up in. They talked about how James Franklin could never win the big games, how Penn State was stuck, then Penn State decides to make a change, and, a lot of people were upset about that. But I understand, when you fire a guy who just took you to the college football playoff semifinal at a place like Penn State, which has not had that success in a very long time, I understand why maybe some of the people that aren't involved in the program, around here in State College, Pennsylvania, would understand where they were coming from and kind of be like, what's going on? Why would you fire a guy like James Franklin, who's had all the success that he has had at Penn State? But again, as I said, when it happened, I understand where Pat Kraft was coming from. I understand the move. It's a risk. It's a high-risk situation. Time will tell if it was the right decision, but I understand why Pat Kraft made this move. So where does Penn State go from here? As you mentioned, you fire James Franklin. Penn State has not won a game since they fired James Franklin. 0-3 in the Terry Smith era. Have a very winnable game and a big opportunity against Michigan State in the Battle of the Land-Grant Trophy, another team that is still looking for their first conference win with Jonathan Smith as the head coach in East Lansing. Did have some conference wins, but they have been vacated now with some things that went on at Michigan State, playing with some ineligible players, but that's where Penn State goes this week. But again, this season, it's kind of just building blocks, kind of maybe, trying to salvage a season, kind of enjoy it for your fan base before, of course, you make the big move, which is finding who is going to be the guy to lead Penn State into the future do not think Terry Smith is going to be that guy, the interim head coach at Penn State. With that being said, I think the next head coach at Penn State needs to keep Terry Smith on the staff. Terry Smith has done a phenomenal job keeping this locker room together. He says all the right things. The fan base loves him. He's a Penn State alum. He's been with Penn State throughout James Franklin's entire tenure, so he's a well-tenured staff member on this Penn State staff, and I think Terry Smith is an absolute keep. Even though I don't think he's the next head coach, I don't think many people do think he's going to be the next head coach at Penn State. Keeping him on the staff in some role, whether that be going back to associate head coach and secondaries coach, or that be moving him into a different role, maybe even defensive coordinator. Who knows what they decide to do? He's a wide receiver. Maybe he becomes the wide receivers coach. Who knows now that he is the interim head coach? But you have to keep a guy like him. One, roster retention, important. They have some very young talent on this team. Ethan Grunkemeyer maybe coming into his own. We'll see how that works. Had a good game, a good showing against Indiana, his best showing of the season. You have Chaz Coleman, who's everyone really excited about. Kobe Howard, a young receiver. Tyseer Denmark, some young receivers they have. Luke Reynolds is still a young tight end. A lot of people are excited about Andrew Rapley, another one. So a lot of young talent on this Penn State staff that you'd love to keep. And Pat Kraft, he's going to try to make a big swing. He says he wants to be able to win a national championship. That is the standard Penn State is going to hold their next head coach. So you got to find a guy who's going to be able to do that. You don't know how long the leash is going to be. You're going to give him some time, of course. I don't think it's going to be a 1 year. You have to come in and immediately compete for a national championship. Would be nice if Penn State's able to find that. But, of course, with maybe the roster moving around, keeping Terry Smith is going to be very important into keeping some of that young talent and some of the recruits that they're still trying to recruit, still trying to keep that class together in 2026. It's very hard without a sitting head coach, but Terry Smith being on the staff, I think, can go a long way into keeping that staff. The one big thing, to talk about as we're discussing where Penn State's going to go, James Franklin, I think it's all but confirmed. He hasn't signed on the dotted line yet, but he is going to be a head coach somewhere next season. This cycle, he is going to get another head coaching job. It sounds like he wants another head coaching job. He's not going to shy away from it. He's not just going to sit at home, maybe fail these interviews and get just take his buyout money from Penn State. He is going to get another job. Feel like Virginia Tech's a perfect fit for him, as a guy who respects James Franklin, thinks he's a really, really good football coach. I think he would do phenomenal things at Virginia Tech. I think the recruiting base is there for him, of course, kind of taking off over Penn State. Would hurt Penn State a little bit because it is a very similar recruiting base. You're going to be fighting James Franklin for some of these guys. Plus, he's really going to try to bring some of his guys who have a lot of respect for him. You've seen that ever since he's been fired. Other coaches, a la Brian Kelly, has not had the same love from the players in the locker room that James Franklin's had. He has got a phenomenal amount of respect from his players. So I think a lot of them might try to follow him wherever he goes next year. Same with the recruits. So we'll see what that does to Penn State, and maybe it is a full U-Haul bringing in a whole new team, a huge transfer portal class. Feels like that's inevitable for Penn State this year. But the one positive, though, with that is James Franklin is going to take another job. He's going to get paid handsomely for his other job. He's not allowed to take, a discount that's unfair. He's got to go out and try to get the money he deserves with the tenure he has and how big this coaching search is becoming around college football with LSU, Florida, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Oklahoma State, so many big jobs. Arkansas, Auburn's open. Florida State might open. There's so many big jobs up there. Would not be surprised, though. If Florida State opens up, James Franklin's name's going to be thrown around there, and I think that'd be a good fit for him as well, with that Florida recruiting base being able to win. I think he's going to go to the ACC. Feels like a good fit for James Franklin, but he's going to get paid, which means Penn State, with the way the contract language works out that people found out after they fired him, Penn State might not have to pay him anything once he gets a new job. So the buyout, that seemed really big when they made the move, around $50 million, could be nothing, which means Penn State has a full budget to go get themselves a new football coach. Pat Kraft has done a great job investing in this program, and now he said he wants to take some big swings. So we're going to go through the candidate pool, and I have some tiers here that I want to talk about. So let's start with the big swings. These are the guys you're calling. You're calling their agent. You're going to make them tell you no. You're not going to not do your due diligence and, not pick up the phone and call them. Whether these are realistic, unrealistic, you're going to make these guys call you. And it starts, of course, with Marcus Freeman, the head coach at Notre Dame. my gosh, has he's been successful at Notre Dame. Taking over Brian Kelly, which, remember, when he left, Brian Kelly left Notre Dame, a lot of people thought Notre Dame was a program that Brian Kelly was doing great things at, but it wasn't that level of program. A lot of people had some hesitations about Notre Dame. Not many people thought, Notre Dame was the sleeping giant, being able to get back to the glory days we saw with Lou Holtz, back in the 60s and 70s with the way Notre Dame was. Now Marcus Freeman has really helped build that back to where it is. They're recruiting at an extremely high level. It is not easy to recruit at Notre Dame with some of the academic standards. It's hard to get transfers into Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman's been able to do it in a big way in this modern era. They were in the college football playoff national championship game against Ohio State last year. They beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl, and he has Big Ten ties. He's a former Ohio State Buckeye. He's recruited up in here, obviously being in Indiana at South Bend with Notre Dame. So there are ties there. Is Marcus Freeman taking the job at Penn State? I would say absolutely not. I don't think it's going to happen, but he's the guy you have to call and say no. He's a young coach. He's really coming up, and maybe he does want to, go somewhere where maybe it's easier to get transfers. Maybe it's easier to recruit at a high level with NIL and things like that might be holding him back at Notre Dame. But I don't think he's leaving Notre Dame. Maybe for LSU, but there's a lot going on down there. When you look at their coaching search right now, I think Penn State's becoming... It's hard to say they're a better job than LSU because of the recruiting base in New Orleans and all that, but with, Brian Kelly now suing LSU over the buyout conversation down in Baton Rouge, it's a very interesting situation to jump into. So I think at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman's going to stay at Notre Dame. I think they're going to be in the college football playoff. I think they're going to have a long run. I think he's staying at Notre Dame. I do think the only job he leaves Notre Dame for is either an NFL job or Ohio State. I think they're the only two jobs I think you see Marcus Freeman leaving the Fighting Irish to go do. So, not a very realistic candidate to me, but you do your due diligence, you call him, you make him say no. The next one, another guy you definitely call, Mike Elko, the head coach at Texas A&M. Northeast ties, New Jersey ties, Pennsylvania ties. He's been up here. He won at Duke, and he went to Texas A&M after Jimbo Fisher was fired, largest buyout, a lot of money. It's like, how much are we going to invest in the program? And he's done a fantastic job. They sit at 9-0 right now. Looks like they're going to be on their way to maybe the SEC championship, depending how they can finish the year. Still have a tough game at Texas. Of course, competing for a national championship at Texas A&M this year. It's definitely a guy you have to call him, see maybe if he wants to come to Penn State. Again, if we're talking about how realistic it is, I don't see it. I think Mike Elko and this Texas A&M team are going to make a long run in the college football playoff. I think Pat Kraft wants to have a coach by the end of the season to be able to get a recruiting class in, attack the transfer portal, understand, maybe start to recruit the guys you already have on your roster, and try to keep as many players as you can. And I think he's going to want to have a coach in. And Mike Elko, it seems, they're one win away from basically clinching a spot. As they sit at 9-0. Once, if they get to 10-2, I think they're a lock for the college football playoff with some of the wins they have, especially against Notre Dame. So in an SEC schedule, you go 10-2 in the SEC, you're a lock for the college football playoff. So I don't think Mike Elko is going to be the next head coach at Penn State. But you have to call him. You have to make him say no. Maybe there is interest there that, maybe isn't, he's on every hot board, which, I haven't really understood. But he's on every hot board, so you have to call him, and maybe there's some, smoke there, and sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. So you call him, make him say no. I don't think he'll be the next head coach at Penn State, but you never want to rule anything out. Never say never on anything. The next one, another huge swing, Kalen DeBoer, the head coach at Alabama. He's another guy who's on all these hot boards. I don't see it. I don't know why you'd leave Alabama to come to Penn State. I'm one of the biggest Penn State fans you'll find, but Alabama's Alabama. It's a different level down there. They're in the SEC. Nick Saban's built off that program now since Bear Bryant, went down a little bit, but now he's got that thing rolling. They're in the national championship hunt. They're a one-loss team inside the top five. Have an opportunity to win out. Got a tough game against Oklahoma this weekend. They still got the Iron Bowl. They're going to probably play in the SEC championship if they can win out. Kalen DeBoer, he's won everywhere he's been. He was at Washington, won, took that team to the national championship game, lost to Michigan. He won at Fresno State, only 2 years there, went 3-3 in the COVID year, but then 9-3 at Fresno State. Sioux Falls, he was a phenomenal coach down at a lower level. But like I said, I don't think Kalen DeBoer is realistic. I don't think any of those three are going to be leaving their job to go to Penn State. Just don't see it happening. Could I be wrong? I hope I am. These three are phenomenal head football coaches, and if Penn State gets them, talk about a home run hire and Pat Kraft deserves an extension on his contract if he's able to pull one of these guys and they're able to be successful at Penn State. But I do not think these are realistic, and I don't think they are going to happen. I wouldn't bet money. You can bet on this stuff now, which is crazy to think that you can bet on who the next football coach is going to be at some places. But you have to definitely do your due diligence. Call these guys, make them say no, because as sitting coaches, they are probably the best candidates. Of course, Dan Lanning's a candidate, but I don't think he's ever leaving Oregon with the money they have, with Nike backing them. I don't know if he's leaving Oregon. Kirby Smart, same way at Georgia. I mean, he's built that place up. I mean, he's a Georgia Bulldog. I don't think he's leaving that place to go anywhere else. Now we'll go to the next category I have, which are wild cards. Wild card candidates. Where does maybe, you call these guys, and these guys are guys that maybe you want, maybe you don't want. They've all got some interesting, positives and some interesting maybe hesitation to have on there. We'll start with, of course, the guy who's got maybe the biggest, high risk, high reward type. Before we get to that, I'll take a quick drink quick. Sorry, usually Chris would be talking while I take my drink, but all alone today. But wildcard candidate number one, if you can't guess it, it's Urban Meyer. Former Ohio State head football coach, former Florida head football coach, former Utah head football coach, coached with the Jacksonville Jaguars for a season. Talk about a proven winner. Won two national championships at Florida, national championship at Ohio State. Built the program at Ohio State to be a national power. When Jim Tressel was there, felt like they were a local team, would always recruit the Ohio guys, would be this tough-nosed team. He took Ohio State to complete next level. Ryan Day's taken it and ran with it as well. Another guy I didn't mention in the you have to call. Of course, you call Ryan Day. He's not leaving Ohio State. And it's just end of discussion. Unless he's going to the NFL. He's not leaving Ohio State to go to Penn State. But Urban Meyer, proven winner, can do it everywhere. There is a lot of baggage there. The season with Jacksonville in the NFL did not go well. There was a lot of things that came out that were not positive. Florida, he had some issues. Ohio State, he had some issues off the field that led to his retirement at Ohio State. There's definitely some negatives there when you're trying to hire Urban Meyer. But you want to win football games, he might be one of the top guys, to call and, figure out, be able to get him in here and be able to compete at the highest level. There are reports that he had 2 interviews. Don't know how true these are. There's, Urban Meyer's, pushed back and said these did not happen. But there are reports that there were interviews that went on. The first interview reportedly went really well. Second interview involving NIL did not go well. These, again, are reports, so allegedly they happened. Urban Meyer said they haven't happened. Urban Meyer's never coached in the NIL era. A lot of people forget that. He stepped away from the college football after the 2018 season, so he's never coached in the NIL era in college football. I can't imagine him being so anti-NIL, just the way he is, being on TV, still being involved in the sport. Feel like he would, be, even if he doesn't want to touch it, doesn't want to be involved with the money, it would be a, you guys handle it, I'm not going to touch it type thing. But I could be wrong. Maybe these conversations did happen and Urban isn't a guy who's going to support NIL. Maybe him and Pat Kraft's philosophies are different. Again, I do not know, but he's a big wild card. He's a huge wild card, and he's a guy that, could get you to the highest of highs, but it also could be a complete colossal failure. You never know what you're going to get in these type of situations, especially hiring these former head coaches. Obviously it's very different than hiring Bill Belichick, because that's an NFL guy, no real college roots, trying to bring him into the college world. Urban, a proven college winner, but hasn't coached in the modern era, so it'd be interesting to see how that worked. Don't think it's going to happen, but you never know, as we continue to say. Next up, Brian Daboll. This is a guy who's now been fired by the New York Giants as their head coach. And there's a lot of smoke going on with Brian Daboll. And it's been really interesting. He's an offensive mind. He was very good with the Bills with Josh Allen, helped build Josh Allen. Has had some success with the Giants, took them to the playoffs in year 1. Now, they have gotten worse every year, and now he's been let go after a tough season this year. Had Jackson Dart rolling, though. But he's an NFL guy. He's been really, really successful in the NFL. We've seen teams go to the NFL to try to find their next coaches. North Carolina just did it with Bill Belichick. It has not been successful. There's been some positives. They're winning a couple games here and there, but definitely has not been the highest of highs that maybe North Carolina was hoping for. And I think those lead to the questions with Brian Daboll. Is he a fit in college football? He had some ties to Penn State. I believe his son was involved in the program over the last couple years. But I I just don't see him going to college. I think he can absolutely be a coordinator in the NFL, an associate head coach. I don't think he wants to come down to, the college ranks. I still think, there are some pro guys that feel that as a demotion. Even though maybe sometimes it's not, maybe it's just a fit thing, going down, getting your legs back before you go back to the NFL type of those things, but I don't see it. But there's a lot of smoke here. A lot of people are bringing it up. So I definitely think you have to have him on a candidate list just to see what happens. Because like you said, when there's smoke, there's fire. He also has a great relationship reportedly with Terry Pagula, who we're going to get into with our next candidate, which is Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator. Penn State ties. He worked at Penn State with Joe Moorhead in the 2016-17 years. Penn State, maybe their most successful years under James Franklin outside of, the recent run to the college football playoff semifinals. He works for Terry Pagula currently. As we said, there's that tie there. Terry Pagula has been heavily involved with Penn State, helped build the ice arena, is helping with NIL with the hockey program. Still believe he really helps with the football program as well. And Joe Brady works with him right now with the Bills. And unlike Dable, proven success in college. He was involved in the offensive staff with Joe Burrow and LSU, one of the best college offenses we've ever seen before jumping to the NFL. So he has that success in college. As we mentioned, he was with Penn State, with maybe their most successful offenses in the James Franklin era. So proven guy in college. The question for me, and I've kind of thought about this because he's on a lot of people's list, but for me, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think Joe Brady's maybe a year away from being an NFL head coach, instead of going to college. Because, when you're the Bills offensive coordinator, you have Josh Allen. You're always going to be in the playoffs. You're always going to have some good numbers. You're going to be able to sell that to a future employer. I think you're always going to be on that short list of candidates trying to get to the NFL. And I just see that as definitely a possibility, and I don't know if he'll want to jump to college, which could maybe derail that if you struggle in college. Plus, for Penn State, if he comes and he's really successful in college, is he looking to get back into the NFL? Who knows? So I think that's something, maybe a concern there. And plus, I think Joe Brady, it's also the timeline. Penn State maybe wants a coach at the end of November. The NFL's regular season goes into January. The Bills, of course, going to be in the playoffs, so that's going to go into late January. So some concerns there, hiring Joe Brady on maybe the timeline Penn State's looking on. But talk about a winner. I mean, the stats they put up, that 2019 LSU season was magical, especially offensively. Now, he's not, I don't know if you'll ever find a quarterback receiver talent gap that they had. I mean, Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I mean, that's about as good as it gets. So I don't know if Penn State would ever be able to get that. But, if they want to try, Joe Brady's absolutely the guy to give a call. So those are the wild cards. Those are the guys that, maybe, former NFL guys, Urban Meyer on TV. Guess you could throw Nick Saban in there. He's not coming to Penn State. He kind of said that already. I don't think he's leaving Penn State. I think he enjoys his job on TV, sitting next to Pat McAfee. Looks like he's having some fun on College game day. They're going to be in Pittsburgh this week for the Pitt Notre Dame game. So I don't think he's going back to coaching anytime soon. I don't think you leave Alabama to sit out for 2 years and then come to a school like Penn State or LSU. He's going to be brought up there as well. I just don't see that happening. So now let's look to, in my mind, where it starts with the truly realistic candidates. And these are the sitting Power 4 coaches that Penn State's going to be looking at. What do you need to do? How do you get these deals done? And I think it starts with the guy who's had the most smoke, since the start of the search, and continues. Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach at Missouri, officially out of the college football playoff, it seems like, after their loss to Texas A&M. An injury at the quarterback derailed those season. We'll get into the quarterbacks. But he's built Missouri into an SEC contender. They've been competing for a playoff spot the last 2 years. Now, they haven't been able to get there. But, Missouri's a school that I think a lot of people on the outside don't expect to be competing for SEC spots, getting to the college football playoff. Missouri's been there. They've been competing for SEC championships under Eli Drinkwitz. So, it's a big opportunity for Drink being able to do that, and that's proven in Penn State with James Franklin. They went to an SEC school that wasn't able to be very successful in Vanderbilt. He made them competitive. Then they brought him in, and they've had success at Penn State with that model. Maybe they try to go back to that. He recruits PA well. He's got some Pennsylvania guys on his team, most notably the quarterback room. Bo Pribula, of course, the transfer from Penn State, transferred to Missouri, was having a good season before he got hurt. Matt Zollers, the freshman quarterback, who's now the starter for Missouri after the injury to Bo Pribula. He's also a Penn State guy, former Penn State commit. So, could be a great fit. Could be a natural fit there for Drinkwitz. I think there are some concerns on Does it always work just hiring a Power 4 coach, bringing him over? Does it always work? Sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's a really realistic opportunity. I think there's a lot of smoke there, and sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire, and I think there's definitely fire with Eli Drinkwitz potentially being Penn State's next head coach. Does he want to leave the SEC? Does he think maybe he has a good thing going at Missouri? Maybe he tries to stay there, but I think that's a definite target for Penn State, and I think it's a shot they are willing to take definitely. Now we'll move to Jeff Brom, the Louisville head coach. You want to look for a reason to hire this guy? He took Purdue to the Big Ten championship. You look at Purdue. Do they really belong in the Big Ten championship? I would probably say no. Now, it wasn't the Big Ten West, so it was when the Big Ten East-West, there was that huge gap between the two divisions. But he had Purdue in the Big Ten championship before leaving to go to Louisville, which is his alma mater, but he has been very successful. That team is still in the hunt for a college football playoff spot if they're able to get into the ACC championship. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. They have 2 conference losses, and there is a logjam of one-loss conference of teams with 1 conference loss in the ACC. So I don't think they're going to be playing for the ACC championship, which means they're probably eliminated from the college football playoff consideration. But, I mean, dude's a winner. Now, the one thing, does look like he's going to be signing a contract extension. So it will really rule him out if he does sign that. Kind of been a lot of, reports there, so it looks like he's going to be staying at Louisville. But you want to talk about a guy who wins. The energy he has, he'll bring it. He'll absolutely bring it. So I think he's definitely got to be on Penn State's list. Doesn't look like it's going to happen, with him signing the extension. But definitely a candidate for Penn State. Going to pause here to get a drink. All right. Boy, I miss Chris. Miss Chris to be able to talk during my drink breaks. But now we move to Brent Key, the Georgia Tech head coach. Winner. Absolute winner. Tough guy. I mean, you look at the way he's been able to build Georgia Tech. They're a competitive football team. They're competing for a college football playoff spot this year if they're able to get in the ACC championship. Have a big game against Georgia. Nearly beat Georgia last year in Athens. Get them at home this year. Home. That game being played in Mercedes-Benz. I don't like it for Georgia Tech. Moving that game out of your home stadium to go play at basically a neutral site where it's going to be a majority of Georgia fans does not help you. But, that's what they have to deal with. But it's been a great run for Brent Key at Georgia Tech. Great culture builder. You look at the culture down there at Georgia Tech, it's been phenomenal. The Yellow Jackets doing a really good job under him. It's the same thing with Jeff Brom. Are you going to pull him away from his alma mater? He went up at a press conference saying, "You cut me open. You know what color I bleed." Now, most of us bleed red, so I don't know. Maybe he does bleed blue and gold, but it's blue. Penn State's blue and white, so maybe there's a chance there. But no, he seems locked into his alma mater. He loves Georgia Tech. I don't blame him. I mean, if I was at my alma mater, if I was the head coach at Penn State, I probably wouldn't want to leave. Now Penn State, most people say is a better job than Georgia Tech. It's a second job in your own state. It's really tough to win there. But yeah, he's done a really good job. He's found the blueprint to compete at Georgia Tech, to consistently compete for an ACC championship. And I think he's going to stick with that. But absolutely, a guy at Penn State, there are reports they went down and interviewed him. And if they're going to interview him, they're going to give him the time of day, and it's going to be an opportunity. Now, the last one, if you look at his head coaching resume, he's not a true candidate. But, I could be wrong. And that's former Penn State defense coordinator, current Duke head coach, Manny Diaz. This is a team that could potentially be in the college football playoff if they're able to get some help. One conference loss. Now they're in a tough spot where they could be the nightmare fuel that leaves the ACC completely out of the college football playoff. It's definitely a possibility. But they're competing. They have some tough non-conference losses this year. Lost to Tulane, lost to Illinois, just lost to UConn. It's been tough, but he's a great leader. Former Penn State defense coordinator. He's had ties. A lot of people love him in State College. He's got a lot of great relationships with people high up in the Penn State program. With his time here with James Franklin as the defense coordinator before taking the Duke head coaching job. So there's definitely going to be a lot of push for Manny Diaz. The one thing, has not been successful as a head football coach. I'm just going to say it. It's true. I love him as a defense coordinator. I think his energy's great. I think he's a master motivator. At Miami, he struggled. At Duke, it hasn't been perfect. I mean, they've got 4 losses. 3 of them in non-conference play, of course, so it keeps them in the run, but they're a 4-loss team. And I just don't know if that's going to be a sexy enough hire for Penn State. I think a lot of fans would love it. Like I said, he's got a great rapport with the fan base. He's got a lot of great relationships here. I think a lot of people love him, but it's just there are a lot of questions about his head coaching resume that I think would be a fair red flag for Penn State fans to look at, and for, definitely Pat Kraft to look at as well and be like, man, we love him, but there's definitely some red flags to look at. So those are all the Power 4 coaches. Another guy I didn't mention, I didn't put him on my list, Matt Rhule. Signed an extension with Nebraska. Don't think he's leaving. I know he's a Penn State guy. I know he's a State College guy, but I don't think he's leaving Nebraska to come to Penn State after signing an extension. That would be a tough pill to swallow, especially in conference when you might have to play Nebraska. Penn State and Nebraska play in 2 weeks. So he's gonna get to play here at Beaver Stadium, but I don't think he's going to be the next head coach of Penn State. Plus, end of the year hasn't been great for Nebraska. I don't think Penn State fans were really sold on him when they were talking about him because of his record against top 25 teams. So I definitely think Penn State might stay away from Matt Rhule, and I think Matt Rhule's kind of decided that as well by signing the extension at Nebraska. Now we'll move to what used to be the model. This used to be the model. It used to not be taking, other Power 4 head coaches. It used to be taking Group of 5 head coaches and bringing those guys up. The hot new Group of 5 head coach. Who are you calling? Who are you bringing in? So that used to be the way it goes. Now, a guy I don't have on my list but could definitely be mentioned, John Summerall, the head coach at Tulane. I think he's going to be heavily involved in the Auburn coaching search. I think he's going to be involved in the LSU coaching search. I don't think he's going to be involved in the Penn State coaching search. Southern guy. I think he wants to stay down south. I think the only way he's leaving Tulane is to go to the SEC. But for the first guy I'm going to bring up, USF head coach Alex Golesh. He's built USF into a playoff contender real quick. They're right now the favorite to be the Group of 5 representative in the college football playoffs. They sit ranked 24th in the country in the latest college football playoff rankings. He's a winner. He's done a really good job. USF used to be, a laughingstock program in the state of Florida. It's really hard to recruit in the state of Florida because Florida's got so much great talent, and everyone's coming in to try to take it. He's been able to win with what he's had. He's doing more with less, which is a huge thing. If you're able to do, a lot of people love that. I love it. I think it's great if you can do with less. Imagine what you can do if we give you more. And Penn State would be able to do that. And there are reports that he did interview for the job, and a lot of people said the interview went extremely well. And, seems like a guy a lot of people love. Seems like he's going to be heavily involved in this coaching search. And I absolutely think he deserves serious consideration for the job. Now you look at a guy, and this is a guy I love. I really love this guy. Bob Chesney, the head coach, James Madison. He's a winner everywhere he's been. A lot of it's at the lower level, but he's been really good. Gets the job at James Madison. This was a tough job to inherit. People don't realize that. This is a really tough job to inherit when Curt Cignetti left, because he took a lot of the guys with him, took the coaching staff with him. Bob Chesney comes in, brings his own new flair to it, own new feel. They're a one-loss team. They are actually in the conversation to potentially be a college football playoff team. I don't think it's extremely realistic, but it's definitely a possibility. They finish 11, 12, and 1, win the Sun Belt. They're going to be in the conversation if a team like Duke would win the ACC, and maybe an American team falls off, they have a chance to sneak in there. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for James Madison to make the college football playoff. And Bob Chesney, Pennsylvania ties. He's a Dickinson alum. He's a central Pennsylvania guy. He's a PA native. And I think there's definitely an opportunity there that it's a fit. And I know what everyone's going to say. No, Bob Chesney, can't hire him. You don't fire James Franklin to hire a Group of 5 head coach. What Pat Kraft needs to do, and I think Pat Kraft will do this, if you're hiring a head coach, hire the best football coach. Don't worry about winning the press conference. Everyone who worries about winning the press conference usually doesn't end up getting the guy they need to be able to be successful. But you interview Bob Chesney or Alex Golesh for that matter as well, who, remember, I just said seems like he might have aced his interview. You interview a guy like Bob Chesney, and he's the best football guy, and you interview all these guys and say Bob Chesney's the guy. You hire Bob Chesney, or you hire Alex Golesh, or maybe you hire some of these coaches. Maybe Manny Diaz is the guy. If you think Manny Diaz is the guy, you hire him. You don't worry about fan reaction. You do what's best for you, because this is going to be the moment that defines Pat Kraft's tenure at Penn State. Could be make or break. Don't like to get into guys, job security. But when you fire a guy like James Franklin, you got to get the next guy right. I have faith in Pat Kraft, but it can't be about winning the press conference. It has to be about getting the best guy. And if that's a Group of 5 head coach, it's a Group of 5 head coach. So Those are my top two guys, Alex Golish and Bob Chesney from the group of 5 ranks. So I think they definitely deserve some consideration there. Pause and take a drink quick. Weather, man. Getting cold. Stuff getting caught up in the throat. And need to keep that water very close. So, went through a bunch of sitting head coaches. It's a great way to get a head coach. Just hire another head coach. It seems right. Hire the guy with experience. But my personal preference, and if you look around college football at the best programs, this is what they did, is to hire a coordinator. It took me a while to get here, but I think that's what you need to do. And I'm going to start. I think coordinators are great. Dan Lanning, Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, all coordinators. Marcus Freeman was a coordinator. I mean, those are the guys you hire at the big programs, and they're able to be successful because they're coordinators and they've been given their opportunity and they've been able to shine. Yeah, that's what you got to look at. So for me, I got 2 coordinators down on my list. First guy, Will Stein, the head offensive coordinator at Oregon. Great quarterback development. Phenomenal. Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore, they've been great. Big Ten ties now with Oregon. Crazy to say, but he does have Big Ten ties. He's a young mind. Could be the next great head coach. You don't know. Are you going to be the guy who says, I can't hire him because he's a coordinator, then watch another school hire him and him be really good? Do you really want to be the guy who waits? Remember, Georgia did this when they fired Mark Richt. They did it really because they wanted Kirby Smart, the defense coordinator at Alabama at the time, and it's really worked out for him. So maybe Will Stein's that guy. I don't know, but he could be. So I think he's definitely got to be on your list, deserves an interview. Again, I'm a coordinator guy. I think you go for the coordinator. And then my guy, if I had to pick one guy, I've been on this, to be the next head coach at Penn State, I would pick Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. This guy's as good as it gets when it comes to recruiting. He has been the position coach of the best unit in America. The Ohio State wide receiver room has been by far, in my mind, the best unit since Brian Hartline's taken over as the wide receivers coach, and now, of course, he's the offensive coordinator. Guess what? The offense is doing great. Julian Sayin looks great. Heisman candidate. Jeremiah Smith's still there. Carnell Tate. Brandon Ennis. Then you go back. You have Jackson Smith-Njigba. Marvin Harrison Jr. Garrett Wilson. Chris Olave. Terry McLaurin. So many great guys have went through Brian Hartline's room at Ohio State. The player development's great. The recruiting's great. I mean, he's been special. And I think he brings a new energy to Penn State if he becomes the head coach. Young guy, comes in, finally gets his program, brings a winning culture from Ohio State. Now, I know there's going to be some concerns. Penn State hired Jim Knowles from Ohio State. It hasn't worked out. Is there a reason? How does Brian Hartline, form his staff? How does that happen? They're valid concerns. But I think when you look at the energy, when you look at, what he's been able to do with the wide receiver room at Ohio State, bringing that to Penn State feels like a great opportunity to really take over, maybe restart, and, have that new energy Penn State's looking for. Plus, I think an offensive coach goes a long way here for Penn State. I think that's what the fans are clamoring for, and I think Brian Hartline would bring that. So that'd be my endorsement. I think that's the guy to go with. Could be right, could be wrong. You never know. And that's the big thing. When Penn State did this, everyone's like, there has to be. There's not. There's not the slam dunk that's going to be the perfect hire. There's going to be concerns about every guy you mention in this search. So you got to go with your gut. You got to go with what you believe in. This could be a colossal failure for Penn State. It could be the best thing that's ever happened to the program. You don't know until you try. That's the risk you take when you fire a guy like James Franklin. So my opinion, be Brian Hartline. I know there's a lot of other guys that are going to be on the list. As I mentioned, you guys, leave down in the comments who you guys think should be the next head coach at Penn State. But my vote would be for Brian Hartline. Now, let's go to our weekly picks and let's get out of here. So we've had fun with our weekly picks recently. The upset picks are going hot. Really hot, excuse me. Before we get started, let me get a drink quick. All right. So, as I said, the upset picks, getting hot. Chris and I both back to 500 at 5-5. Chris and I still, to this day, if we get it right, we both get it right. If we get it wrong, we both get it wrong. We haven't had one where one of us got it right, one of us got it wrong. Current scoring, as I mentioned, 1 point for a cover. You get plus 2 points, so 3 points for an outright win from a 0 to 3 point underdog. 5 points for a 3.5 to 6.5 point underdog, getting an outright win. 7+ point underdog, you get 7 points for an outright win. So, we look at it this week. Chris, not with us, but he did send in his picks, so really appreciate it. Chris, going to Sunday Night Football. He's taking the Lions to defeat his hated Eagles. Chris, not an Eagles guy, as we mentioned, but he's going to take the Lions to beat them. Don't disagree with the pick. I mean, it's Eagles off an ugly 10-7 win on Monday Night Football against the Packers. So the Lions now coming in, maybe trying to get a win after a big win. Dan Campbell's taking over play calling duties for Detroit. So a great opportunity. So Chris, rolling with the Lions. For me, I'm going to a team to get a sweep in the division. As you guys know, I'm normally against this. I'm taking the Cincinnati Bengals to upset the Pittsburgh Steelers. 5.5-point dogs. The Steelers did not look good against the Chargers. Things are not trending well. It's been a tough couple weeks after that win against Indianapolis. That last week felt like, just awful. Aaron Rodgers seems like he aged very, very quickly. But it was a really tough loss. Bengals off a bye. Joe Flacco's been playing great. Joe Burrow coming back, I think, reignites, some of the energy. He's not back yet, but the report said he is going to come back, maybe try to get a push, get back in contention, and then have him come back and maybe steal a wild card spot. I think it's absolutely an opportunity, and I think that's what we're going to see. So I like the Bengals here in Pittsburgh, pulling off the upset over the Steelers. Should be a really fun game in the division. It's always been. The last game was great. Remember that Thursday Night Football Unk Bowl between Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers? Maybe we get that again here. Steelers offense should look better. You play against the Bengals defense, you're going to get opportunities to look a lot better. But now we go to week 11. It starts in Madrid. We're in Spain this week, guys, finishing up the international tour of the NFL. Commanders at Dolphins. Chris rolling with the Commanders here. It's been a tough couple weeks, but Chris taking the Commies to get the win. For me, I'm rolling with the Dolphins. I like the energy they had. They got a win over Buffalo last week. I think they carry that into Spain. Get a big-time win over a Commanders team that's really been reeling all year long. They've been really banged up. Game I don't want to talk about. Chargers at Jags. Jags coming off blowing a 19-point fourth quarter lead to Davis Mills, taking on the LA Chargers, coming off a very good win on Sunday Night Football against the Steelers. Chris is taking the Chargers here and Justin Herbert to get the win. And for the first time this season, I'll be taking against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am taking the Chargers as well. Vibes are low in Duval County. It has not been good. I think that loss is a microcosm of the season. I think you needed that to keep that momentum going. The way the Colts were able to win, in Germany, and now the Jags taking that tough loss. I think they take another one here against the Chargers. I think that loss last week carries over into a second loss. Bengals at Steelers, as I said, I'm taking the Bengals here as my upset pick. Chris does agree he is taking the Bengals as well. Bucks at Bills. Chris taking the Bills to bounce back after the tough loss against the Dolphins. The Bucks are my Super Bowl pick out of the NFC, but I am taking the Bills here. Don't think they drop 2 in a row. I think this is a bounce-back opportunity for Buffalo after that borderline embarrassing loss to Miami. In my mind, maybe the biggest upset of the season with the way that game went. I think the Bills bounce back at home. Give me the Bills. Bears at Vikings. Remember, this is J.J. McCarthy's best game at the beginning of the season. That fourth quarter he had, they were able to come back and beat the Bears. Bears on a little bit of a win streak here. Keep an eye out on Ben Johnson and the Bears. Chris taking the Bears here. Hasn't been super high on the Bears, but they found ways to win. I'll take the Vikings at home. The Bears have really been skidding by if you watch some of these games. That win they had against New York, it's been up and down for Chicago, so I think the Vikings get them this week. Vikings coming off that loss to Baltimore last week. Texans at Titans. Chris and I both taking the Texans. Don't have to spend much time on that as they defeat Cam Ward and the Titans coming off a bye. Panthers at Falcons. Chris taking the Falcons here after the tough losses they've had. Back-to-back weeks, real tough losses. 1-point loss to New England, and then the loss in overtime to Indianapolis. I'll take the Falcons as well. Meow Mix Podcast might as well come back. You guys know it's a running bit on the show about me mentioning the Meow Mix Podcast. Come back. They lost to the Saints. You can come back now after they're going to lose to the Falcons this week, in my mind. Packers at Giants. Jameis Winston getting the start for the New York Giants this week as Jackson Dart is out. Not going to Russell Wilson. They'll go to Jameis Winston. Chris and I both taking the Packers here. Trying to bounce back after the Monday night loss to the Eagles at home. Think they do. The Giants, just been a tough loss. There is the interim coach, backup quarterback bump potentially here for the Giants, but we will both take the Packers here to get the win. Seahawks at Rams. Sneak. Oh, my. Just at the beginning of the season, this looked like a good game, a colossal game in the NFC West. Maybe the two best teams in the league right now. Chris taking the Seahawks, who've been red hot. Sam Darnold looks great. Jackson Smith and Jigba would be a runaway favorite for Offensive Player of the Year if it wasn't for Jonathan Taylor and what he's been doing in Indianapolis. I'll be taking the Rams here, though, because I said Jackson Smith and Jigba might be the runaway favorite for Offensive Player of the Year if it wasn't for Jonathan Taylor. Well, Matthew Stafford might be the runaway favorite for MVP. He has been phenomenal. 13 touchdowns over his last 3 games, 25 touchdowns with 2 interceptions this season. He has been great. There were a lot of questions about him coming into this season, but boy, has he shut all of them down. It's a huge game between these two teams. Give me the Rams to knock off the Seahawks at home in SoFi. I think that does help as well. I think they're probably going to split, and I am be the home team in this one. Niners at Cardinals. Brock Purdy is back. Finally. He's been questionable for about 6 weeks, it feels like, since that Jags game he came back for and got hurt again. Chris and I both taking the Niners. The Cardinals have not looked good. Still sticking with Jacoby Brissett here. Give us the Niners. No Marvin Harrison Jr. either for the Cardinals. Ravens at Browns. We'll sweep it here. We'll both take the Ravens as well. Dylan Gabriel's still the starter there. I mean, we were down on Shedeur to start the year. Well, I was. I'm not going to speak for Chris. I think it's time. Shedeur's going to get a look before the end of the season, I believe, because I think you got to figure out if you need a new quarterback. Dylan Gabriel's not the future. Didn't think he ever was, but I think you're definitely going to see an opportunity here for Shedeur to get some snaps at some point this season. Chiefs at Broncos, big game in the AFC West. Broncos, an opportunity to really knock the Chiefs out of the division race and really solidify themselves as a true 1-seed contender here. Broncos long rest after that game on Thursday night against the Raiders last week. Chris and I will both be taking the Chiefs. We've kind of talked about this. The Broncos, it's been ugly. Every week's been ugly. They've found ways to win. I think they run out of finding ways to win here against Kansas City this week. So we will both be taking the Chiefs to knock off the Broncos. Off a bye for Kansas City. I think Andy Reid's going to have the boys ready to play. Sunday Night Football. Lions in Philadelphia taking on the Eagles. Chris, it's his upset pick. He's taking the Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs, that offense, maybe try to score more than the Eagles offense that has struggled. Bad vibes in Philadelphia. A.J. Brown saying drop him on your fantasy team if you have him. There's not a lot of confidence there from A.J., but I will take the Eagles at home. I don't know why, but I just feel like it's a bounce-back opportunity for Philly. I think they find ways to get things going offensively in this game. I think maybe AJ does have a big game because it seems like when everything's going wrong, it's when he bounces back. So we'll see if he's able to do that. So I will take Philadelphia begrudgingly, taking the Eagles here on Sunday night. Last game, Monday Night Football. Cowboys at Raiders. Won't spend much time on this. Cowboys off a bye. Give us both the Cowboys to knock off the Raiders. Chris, only 2 games back. We have a lot of games where we're kind of different this week. So Chris will have an opportunity maybe to come back in, our picks race. So that'll be fun to see there. Again, that's going to do it here. We spent a lot of time on college football. I like to talk about college football. On Monday, we will be back recapping the NFL season. Chris, still out on Monday, sadly. I know you miss him. I miss him too. I wish I wouldn't have to talk to you, just talk nonstop. Wish I had someone to bounce back off of, but that's how it works sometimes. So I had to do it solo today, but glad, hope you guys enjoyed the Penn State head coaching search. I really like to talk about it. So, again, leave comments on who you think Penn State's next head coach should be. If you leave comments on who you think, maybe you hate some of our picks, maybe you hate our upset pick, let us know about it in the comments as well. Please subscribe to the channel, give a like to the video if you did. Please make sure to check out all the shorts, all the TikToks on social, whether it be Instagram Reels, whether it be TikTok, or here on YouTube Shorts. If you're listening on YouTube, again, you can also be listening on Spotify. We do appreciate all you guys for helping us out here. So that is going to do it here today. We'll be back at it on Monday morning, recapping what should be a fun and wild NFL week. Oh, almost forgot. We both took the Patriots this week in the picks, so we'll see how the Patriots do it. Again, recorded a little early today. This is just how we had to do it this week, but we are recording a little early, so trying to check the score. Patriots lead 24-14 with 7 minutes to go. So looks like the Patriots are going to be able to get a win for Chris and I over the Jets. But that is going to do it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.